Café and Networking Podcast promotes entrepreneurs, startups, authors, business experts throughout the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American known as the King of Networking, connecting people and speaking from my studio in Vinhedo, São Paulo, Brazil. Today we talk with Barry Braun, and he's joining us from Halifax in Nova Scotia, Canada. Barry Braun is founder of Happy Community Project and Happy Community Builders. For more than 10 years, the project enables citizens to shift the culture of their community to a more connected, belonging, and caring community. Barry, how do you inspire a community to action?
Well, that's a great question, Tom, but I'd love to just shift it around a little bit. It's more like, how do you inspire a community to be? So being drives action. How we be drives action. And so the real question is, how do you inspire a community to be the kind of community they want to be, and so that they act in the way that they want to act? And what the research says, there's lots and lots of research, foundational research on community development, community well-being, community resiliency, and it all comes down to that communities that are strongly socially connected, have a strong sense of belonging and a strong sense of caring for each other, are communities that are resilient and well-being communities. So the question is, how do we do that? How do we create a community that is strongly connected, has a strong sense of belonging and caring for each other? And the way that we do that is we shift the community story from what it is to a new story. We enable the community to do this themselves. We enable the community to shift their own story. So my experience is, if you ask a half a dozen people in a community, tell me about your community, in there will be a common thread to what they're talking about. They'll talk about their community being divisive, or nobody cares about their community anymore, or whatever they say. They may also say it in the positive. It's a really wonderful place to live and that sort of thing. But there will be a common thread in there. And that common thread determines the actions of the community, how the citizens of the community actually behave in their own community. And so what we do is we enable citizens to go through a process, the Happy Community Project process, that enables them to shift their story. It takes about 18 months or so, but the results are incredibly dramatic.
So your building is not necessarily brick and mortar. You're changing a mindset.
Exactly. We're changing a mindset of the community, that we all have an attitude towards our community that we live in, and we're shifting that. And it's, I shouldn't say that we are shifting the mindset. We enable the community itself to shift their mindset. It's not an outside force that's shifting it. It comes from the inside out.
Right.
So that, and that's what makes it a permanent cultural shift, which then provide some sustainability to their new way of being.
Well, the concept of community, from what you're saying, it's global. We're not talking about just Canada.
No, this is universal. We've done work in across Canada, but also in the United States, in Boulder, Colorado, and also in Pennsylvania. And we've also done work in India and Uganda, where we've enabled those communities also to make cultural shifts in how they look at themselves as a community.
So there is the cultural aspect to a community.
Absolutely. We all talk about community spirit, right? We've heard that's a fairly common terminology, community spirit. And what is community spirit? Well, it is the shared common beliefs that the community has about itself, and those shared common beliefs are the culture of the community.
And that could be multicultural, as Canada is an example of diversity, of welcoming many peoples and many cultures. So, your community can change even in that factor.
Absolutely. We think, we actually, I think misuse the word culture in that in the context that you're talking about. We talk about that if you're have Asian heritage of some sort or another, or African heritage of some sort or another, you have a culture that's different than the rest of the culture of the rest of the society. But there's also a common culture,
Right.
right? And when you look at a community, a community of say 20,000 people, which tends to be the maximum size of a community that we find actually is a community, then in there you can have lots and lots and lots of difference, but they will still have a common thread, a common story that defines the culture of the community.
Well, it actually redefines in that sense, and you're saying change the mindset. It's actually changing that of those components of the community.
Absolutely, and it's incredibly powerful. When the mind shifts happen, the community behaves in a completely different way, and we've witnessed communities where they were on the decline. They're economically, socially,
Right.
and they've changed their story around from what a divisive, unhappy place this is. Nobody stays here. We're all businesses are leaving us.
Right.
To a story where it's, wow, what a great place to live. Look at our downtown is filled with new businesses, and there's so much happening here. And that's and really not the only thing that changed in all of that is how they thought about their place.
Well, then that's true. I think that gets back to our individual, if they're our household or our home. If we paint the outside, it's the same house, but it could just be that change of showing others that you want to change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a nice metaphor, is putting a new coat of paint on. Still the same house.
So, I've been there. As I said, I'm from Pittsburgh, so I've been there when most of our houses were sooty from the old steel mills, but the renovation was a can of paint. But it was an example of wanting to be different. So,
yeah. So community developers find, here's one of my experiences with community developers and our community builders in general, is that they find their work hard, and basically they're running at a status quo. If they're really successful, for every problem they'll solve, there'll be only one more problem that shows up to replace it.
Right. Or many, but I think that is, and from what I hear what you're saying, what you do is solve problems.
We do.
So that's proactive. Just to sit down and look at them doesn't make things go away.
No, it is very action oriented, but really where the action is in the community itself. They're action communities. We don't actually do anything in a community. We enable the community. We show the community itself how to do things differently and solve their own problems.
But that, Barry, is doing something.
Well, it is.
It's doing a lot. Well, Barry, I want to thank you for your time. We're coming to the end of it, but how can our listeners find more about you and what you do?
Well, the happycommunitybuilders.com website is a place where people who are interested in community development ought to go, because in there is a support group for other community developers, community builders.
So that's the how-to.
It's the how-to. It's more that, they provide each other with a how-to. So community builders often work in isolation. Right. I'm working in my community, you're working in yours. We're trying to solve the same problem and going through the same frustrations and that sort of thing. Well, here's a place where they can come together and share their ideas, and also share in the Happy Community Project's ideas of how to shift stories and that sort of thing, and have greater effectiveness.
Well, thank you, Barry, for being part.
Well, thank you, Tom, for having me on. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
And for our audience, you can find more information about Barry Braun on LinkedIn. That's Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, the last name B-R-A-U-N. And the project Happy Community Builders, altogether.com, happycommunitybuilders.com. Café and Networking is brought to us by Focus MI Market Intelligence, an agricultural market research specialist in Brazil. More information on their website, focusmi.com. Thanks for listening until the next time here at Café and Networking Podcast.